It's really weird to be marketed to as a marketer because you're like, I see you.
Yeah.
And there are some technology and service platforms out there that are offering, customer journey mapping. I personally can't imagine getting value from something like that from someone who doesn't know our customer.
Hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast brought to you by HIMSS and Health Launchpad. I want to thank you all today for listening and watching and however you're consuming this video podcast. I want to welcome you today. I also want to give a big shout out and a thank you to my partner in crime in this endeavor, the awesome HIMSS, the annual global conference coming up very shortly. Hope to see you all there. I'm Adam Chirinas, by the way. I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. I started this podcast with HIMSS because I'm a long-time marketing guy and I've been in healthcare technology for the last 10 years or so. And I've worked in a lot of different categories, a lot of different industries. And the thing that always strikes me about healthcare is it is far and away the hardest category I've ever been involved with. It's the hardest industry to sell into. I just was talking with my friends at HIMSS a while back and we thought, we should really try and help marketers in this area. And frankly, there's no better person to advise another healthcare marketer than another healthcare marketer. So this is an opportunity for leaders in healthcare marketing to provide insights and ideas and just sort of generally their experience so that other people can learn from it and benefit from that advice. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today. I'm going to introduce Kaycee shortly. Kaycee Kalpin. Kaycee is a long-time growth and marketing leader in healthcare marketing. She is the Chief Marketing Officer of Premier Inc., where she's been in various roles since 2013. And she's also an advisor to startups. So, Kaycee, welcome to the show. And tell us a bit about yourself and tell us a bit about Premier.
I've been with Premier, which if you aren't familiar with Premier, a healthcare performance improvement company. We have an enormous tech and data stack and work with the majority of all hospitals and health systems in the nation. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what I'm doing from a marketing perspective for them. But I've been with Premier since the day before its IPO, which is kind of crazy. It's a fun fact.
Nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And have just grown so much along with the company. I'm now serving, like you said, as Chief Marketing Officer, where I'm really responsible for a team of just rock stars. It's hard to hire in this environment and no one steal my people because they're so good, that are helping to shape the reputation and brand of the company and helping all of our business lines reach their growth goals. So I'm excited to be here, maybe share a few tips and tidbits and learn from you too. Thanks again for having me on.
Great. So let's just sort of step back a sec, because I got to tell you, when I started off my journey in the healthcare software world in about 2011, I started a clinical communications company, secure texting company, back in about 2012 with a physician. Now, I had no experience at all in healthcare. So it was sort of like, for me, it was like entering a parallel universe. And to be honest, I didn't really know anything about GPOs and about Premier. So maybe for people who are like myself, maybe early on in their kind of health tech career, maybe they're startups, maybe they're actually coming from a different industry, kind of explain what GPOs do and particularly what Premier does.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we're taking it down a few reading levels, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the $1 million question is, what does Premier do? Which is why marketing at Premier is so critically important. And we do a lot. But group purchasing organizations are organizations that aggregate spend in order to lower the cost. And in the case of Premier, improve the quality of supplies that you get through the supply chain of healthcare. So think of really anything that's used in the hospital setting. The supply chain is the number 2 biggest spend for a hospital, only behind labor. And so our company really works to optimize that spend, ensure that we're trying to, bend the cost curve while not negatively impacting the outcome of the patient. And you're right, Premier is a lot more than just a GPO. And part of that is that, we've disrupted ourselves so many times in knowing that a GPO alone and working on getting to the lowest price is not the best thing for a patient. We need to look holistically at what a patient needs, from the supplies that are used in their journey to the data that's used to treat them. And so for us, it's a lot about helping the hospital, the health system, the provider in any setting perform. So what decisions are they making? What are they buying? How are they caring for the patient? And do they have the right insight, evidence, the right data at their fingertips to do that? And that's really kind of what Premier does. I hope that helped.
Yeah, no, that does. That does, because, I think my perception, my sort of simplification of what GPOs did, this is going back a few years, was that, you're sort of kind of like a wholesale reseller. And that's a kind of a misperception. And I'm sure that's like one of many mistakes that, software vendors make. So I'm just sort of, if you're an early stage company, not a kind of straight out of the box software startup, but maybe somewhere that's sort of like sub $10 million. And they're trying to figure out how to partner with Premier. How do they go about it? And also, what are the things they get wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I will say is there are many different ways to do it, which is why it's probably easy to get it wrong. But that's okay. We're friendly. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. So, let's chat. But companies can partner with Premier in a variety of different ways. The first and most obvious of which is to go through a vetting process to become a contracted supplier of our GPO. Okay. And that's a very rigorous process to ensure, certain milestones and criteria are met in order to be on contract for a group purchasing organization, so that the hospitals and health systems and other provider groups participating can choose your solution, right, among others in its category. Then, beyond that, I would just say collaboration and partnership and really innovation is kind of in our DNA. So we partner with companies doing everything from reseller agreements to co-packaging, going to market to solve unique solutions, whether it's technology or consulting or, some sort of application. I actually run in our innovation lab at Premier. It's called the Pink X Lab. And oftentimes we're vetting companies in that process to say, is this a gap that our customers have that we want to fill? Is it a build, partner, buy scenario? And what are our options out in the marketplace? So your best odds are probably just finding someone connected to Premier and asking the question, here's what we solve for hospitals, health systems, and other providers. How can we get plugged in?
Yeah, it's great hearing you say that. I could not figure it out, and this is going back, 10 years ago, and so I don't think I tried hard enough. I think that's part of the problem.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But it's interesting. So you talk about innovation. What was it? So you say Pink RX. What was it? What did you say your innovation group's called?
So it's our innovation lab, and it's called the Pink X Lab.
Why is what's that name come from?
So Pink is short for Premier Inc. And the X, we just kind of needed a name. Yeah. Okay. And liked it. And now it's kind of stuck. So, we bring external speakers on. We sometimes vet companies through that process. Yep. But yeah, it's our inner lab.
Right. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So you've talked about the transformation that Premier has gone through. And, I think when we've talked before, the way that you've articulated is that it's sort of essentially sort of like the perception has been, being an aggregator, which is actually has hell of a lot of value for providers and for the vendors as well. But you're doing a lot more than that. So, talk a little bit more about the more that you do, and then also just talk about that from a marketing communication standpoint about how you change those sort of entrenched perceptions.
Yes, absolutely. So you're right, more than a GPO. But I will say that our GPO is incredibly strong, more so now than ever. The pandemic in many ways has really validated a lot of our programs and strategies that we've had in place for more than 10 years. So even before the pandemic, we've been identifying unhealthy markets and adding resiliency to the supply chain and de-risking some of those markets that were plagued with disruption recently. Think masks, gloves, gowns, supplies, PPE that is really kind of critical for the care process, but that fell short in some cases during this pandemic. And so bringing, a lot of that to partnering with our members to bring that to domestic manufacturing facilities that can really de-risk them from any sort of disruption. So from the supply chain side, I think we're stronger than ever. I think what really we're really trying to reframe the story and the narrative around our data, which I truly believe. And as a marketer, you need to believe it, right? You need to believe what you say and what you market. I believe that with sales too, is this intense and unparalleled data set. I mean, we have access and visibility into 45% of all discharges in the nation on an annual basis. Over 200 billion points of data are flowing through our platform. And with our members who are all providers, like I said, the majority of all of them in the nation we're partnered with, they're really driving use cases for what we do with that data. And so over the last, 8 years alone, since I've been here, we've bought or built several capabilities to make the best use of that data and the evidence that's generated from it. So think about AI, artificial intelligence enabling workflows with evidence-based care. Clinical decision support is what that is. Connecting self-insured employers with high-value providers, helping providers become self-insured in some cases. And we're, like I mentioned, addressing unhealthy markets. So to just kind of bring this back full circle, Adam, doing this as a marketer is challenging because you're changing the narrative about who people think you are. And we've done a lot of research to find out what people think we are. But it's easy when you have data to back it up and when you have customers who are willing to tell your story. And so we're really focused on those two things.
So it's repositioning Premier to be a solution provider in the broader sense of the word, right? So just your seat at the table is not just helping with the supply chain, which is important, but it's helping them with sort of critical aspects of the transitions that they're going through. Is that right?
And anyone can be, create solutions for providers and for healthcare at large. I think what is unique about Premier and the song that we can sing that is different is based on scale, right? I talk about that huge network. Right. And with the ability to scale innovation, data, evidence, intelligence so broadly, we can accelerate kind of ingenuity in healthcare. And we all know things are moving a little slow compared to other industries. Tech adoption, has definitely been accelerated with the pandemic, but our ability to have visibility into the data to see what works and what doesn't, and then to scale things incredibly quickly sets us apart. And all of that was built based on our history as a GPO.
So you said you did you've done a lot of research. I think it'd be really interesting for listeners, to sort of learn about the different types of customer research that you did to get at this. Absolutely.
There is nothing more important as a marketer, I will say, if we're doing key takeaways yet, than understanding and being able to access the voice of your customer. Yeah. So we've done brand studies, brand equity studies, broadly with different audiences, both the provider audience that we're currently very well penetrating in adjacent markets, including life sciences and payers and others that we are growing into. When you think of Premier, what do you think of? And you have maybe a multiple choice or you can fill in the blank. And measuring that repeatedly is very important so that you can see how far you're growing. We also are very active with customer feedback loops for Net Promoter Score for different segments of our customer base in terms of satisfaction surveys. And we have real-time access to that data and that data flowing into our platform. So all of my marketers have a pulse on what our customers are saying about us, what the North Star is, and are thinking about tactics to really inform the opinion of what we do, but based on facts and stories from our customers. Like, it has to be evidence-based marketing.
Yep. So this is very interesting because, we all do focus groups and one-on-one interviews because they're relatively simple to execute and they're colorful, right? Because you're getting voice, you have quotes to leverage. I would say that, we've interviewed a lot of people through this podcast and several businesses are of a similar scale to Premier, certainly heading that way. But you're the first one that I think actually has talked about the use of brand equity data and using quantitative customer data and feeding that into your marketing loop. So drill in a little bit on that. I mean, I'm really interested in like an example of how you're using sort of real-time data, or at least, sort of quantitative data, and how that's impacting the way you change your marketing.
I think part of the shift is, I'll give you 2 bullet points. One is changing the culture and mindset of how customer centric you are. And that means not only you want to do what's best for your customer, but you also need to have the tough conversations. Some of them have feedback that maybe it hurts our feelings, right? And I think some people are some organizations are very hesitant to unlock the flow of that data because they don't yet know what they can do with it and how they can, grab a hold of that narrative and turn it in their favor. Premier is a growth-minded company. Any data, good, bad, ugly, helps us grow in a way that we otherwise couldn't. And so opening up your mind and being receptive to your customers giving you feedback is critical in my mind. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think, is making sure that you're having a bi-directional conversation with your customers. And this was a big evolution that we went through, which is, doing a Net Promoter Score once a quarter, like some SaaS-based companies do, or even once a year, like others may do, is step 1. It's almost step 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you using? How are you capturing that data and input? And how are you having a bi-directional conversation back with your customers to say, we heard you. And based on your feedback, we're prioritizing these features to our roadmap. And we're adding, we're spending capital in this way. We're enhancing products in this way. or we're not, and why we're not, right? Why we deprioritize this. Just having a free-flowing conversation with your customer, to me, that is kind of the evolution that companies need to go through in order to make real use of this data.
Yes, right. I mean, it's every solution provider, every vendor likes to position themselves as a partner. I've always had the view that sort of like you earn the right to be a partner. And that's actually what you're describing there is about earning the right to be a partner, which is that, we value you and we're going to show you how we value you. And also we're going to tell you if we're not going to do something, we're going to tell you we're not going to do it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Now, in a sort of in smaller businesses where you have fewer customers and maybe more intimate relationships, that's a somewhat easier thing to do. You can do it through a phone call. You can do it through a quarterly meeting. A company like Premier that is, you've got hundreds and hundreds of multi-billion-dollar customers and thousands of vendors, no doubt. How do you manage those communications so that they're done at scale, I guess, but actually still feel intimate?
Yeah, it's, certainly something that we're working on every day. I would say if we're speaking marketing, we certainly take an account-based approach. We have an incredibly strong channel, many of which are badged in the health systems that we work for and working on the inside to help them, put our data to use. So working in partnership with both the product teams and delivery teams, as well as the channel marketing kind of being a leg on the stool, I think is really important. But we also, have different ways of communicating. Some audiences, that communication needs to come from the CEO. Some audiences, it might be better received from our CFO. And for some audiences where we're really trying to build and bridge the relationship between them and their field representative or customer success individual, we want it to come from them and be personalized. It takes more time, but your views and your clicks and your reads and your time spent with the content, I think goes a long way. So I think, back to the key learnings, takeaways. I think oftentimes mid-size to large companies will implement automation platforms, like we use Marketo, for example. Right. But they'll implement automation platforms and automate everything. And everything just goes out as a blast. And it's, dear person, it's not personalized to an audience. And I think that's a huge mistake because your clicks and reads are going to go way down. And your customer is going to feel less and less intimate with you. So those communication points, I think, are really important to map out, to your point.
So how do you personalize and break that down? Which is like, how do you decide who you're going to personalize to? And then how do you segment that? So it's I think I guess what I'm getting at is there's a segmentation. You can't be one-on-one personalization with everybody. You can only do that with some of the people. So I'm just kind of curious to know what your approach is to personalization.
Well, I don't want to necessarily say Premier is utopia, but I do think that that our force, our channel is so strong that they make it pretty easy. I mean, they have assigned accounts that they are incented on the success, the quality and cost metrics of that account and what we can deliver. And so we work hand in hand with that person. I mean, it has got to be in lockstep because that individual is responsible for an account plan and understanding what that account's strategic imperatives are, if they have a cost takeout imperative, if they're launching new services. And so customization starts with really knowing the customer. Customization doesn't start with like the publicly available data. Anybody can plug in a mail merge of a health system's name or an executive's name. Customization is about, and we're doing this in a lot of really sophisticated digital campaigns, but it's about seeing something that looks like it should be such mass marketing and feeling like it was really intended for you.
Yeah.
And that takes a very intimate understanding of the customer.
So you know, how thin do you slice the bologna? So what I mean is that, you know, you're getting the feedback from the account leads in terms of what the issues are with a particular customer. I don't know how many customers you have, but it's in the hundreds, right? So how do you tailor the digital communications that go out? Do you have, like, you know, 25, 50 different personas in Marketo? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, there are a lot of different scenarios and plays we run. We have done it all. We've tailored communications by how much penetration we have in the account, both from an engagement and persona perspective and from a revenue perspective, frankly. We have segmented based on publicly available metrics like, you know, quality scores, or depending on what the solution is that we're marketing. But what really works is having someone sit down with that customer and map out their journey to value with Premier. And what really works is them telling us what matters to them, and then them seeing it fed back to them in a really strategic way.
Right.
And so it's kind of grassroots, Adam. I mean, honestly, it kind of is. It's not automation, and scale and digital is a lot more hands-on than I think most people think.
Oh yeah. I'm a passionate believer in account-based marketing. But I also wonder sometimes, you know, whether some of the newer ABM platforms, you know, demand-based and Terminus, which are, you know, hugely valuable in many regards, whether in a case like yours where you're doing much more sort of one-to-one marketing, right? You're doing, you know, you've got an account lead that manages a relationship and really has the greatest knowledge about that relationship, how much you can actually automate as opposed to curating and doing it by hand. And I'm not sure you can. But I think it's a good point. There are ways that you can customize, and, you know, maybe get a higher click-through rate by putting someone's logo on an ad or customizing, web, for example. And there are certainly campaigns that we've run where that has made sense. And we do use Terminus, but, you know, our journey maps have like hundreds of points on them. Right.
And that Terminus ad that is deployed is one of hundreds of interactions that individual or that account are having with our brand. And so, you know, the real magic is mapping all of that to sort of a customer journey or a decision map, and making sure you have the message right for each stage of the journey.
Right. And do you have a system for tracking that customer journey? I mean, how do you know, if you've got a set of stakeholders within an organization, how do you know what's working and what's not?
So it's interesting that you ask that, because I have been marketed to recently, and it's really weird to be marketed to as a marketer, because you're like, I see you. Yeah. And there are some technology and service platforms out there that are offering, you know, customer journey mapping. I personally can't imagine getting value from something like that from someone who doesn't know our customer. I spend time with customers. People on my team spend time on customers. We sit in and shadow calls. We do our own research. We look at a lot of data. And so it takes time. We talk to the account team. We talk to the service level team. We want to make sure that we understand every single digital or in-person touch point that customer has. And so, I mean, honestly, most of my journey maps are in PowerPoint.
Right. Yeah. Same.
It's like awareness, selection, decision, loyalty, and we just plot some dots. It's not that complicated. I mean, the collection of the data is very complicated, but yeah, it's the presentation is not.
So one of the things you mentioned in a previous conversation is about agile marketing. I'm not really, I know about agile software development, but I've not really heard of it in terms of marketing. Tell me about that. And I think you said you're a certified agile marketer.
I am, and most of my team members are. I give all of them, new hires and everyone on the team, an opportunity to get Agile marketing certified. So this is an actual thing. It's not something that Kaycee Kalpin made up. So I'll tell you, Adam, several years ago maybe two and a half years ago, when I took over this division, a lot of work was happening and it was taking a long time to get to market. Like we would do a annual or even multi-year marketing plan, and you wouldn't see results or any sort of assets get to market for months at a time. And that's just not feasible in today's economy, in the way people consume information today. And so I read a few articles. I worked with a woman that I'm happy to share her information for your podcast, but and really discovered that Agile was a language that everyone in our company could understand. This is something that our software and dev teams do on a daily. They use Scrum, and they have stand-ups, and they have sprints, and all it does to just simplify it for marketers is it breaks down the work. It breaks down the work into manageable chunks that allow you to phase out the implementation of a marketing program such that you're going to market faster and getting more data and feedback on how it's working so that you can evolve it and really crisply make it better and go back to market. And so it's really working for us. We do sprints. Our teams operate in a mixture of kind of Kanban and, other styles, but we use Monday.com for all of our boarding or Agile boards. And it puts you in the mindset of not everything that goes out the door has to be a 10. Like, let's try to get this done this week or today. And let's make it a 4 or 5. And then let's see, is the message on? Is the creative on? Is it the right audience? Is it the right channel? Collect a little bit of information so that when you deploy and redeploy that same tactic, it's better each time. So we're seeing really good results from it. I know it's kind of on trend right now, but I'd be interested to hear if any of the other of your listeners are working in Agile. I
will ask people about that. Haven't really heard it, and maybe they're doing it and I just didn't ask. But I mean, I'm very familiar with what you're describing, because it is it's my software team in my own company used Agile. So Agile like they called it, but it was Agile, and used Monday as their platform for doing it. And I can see, particularly in a situation like company like yourselves, where you're customizing and personalizing to many, many different accounts, and you've got to crank out a lot of stuff, in a short period of time. That you're going to get bogged down, and I think that makes real sense. So thank you for explaining that. So,
and I think, Adam, it's interesting thinking of it from the perspective of improving the bidirectional communication with your product teams. And it's kind of like we found our groove with our product teams because we now speak the same language.
Right.
And so our product managers that we work with on the other side understand that there's only so much product marketing we can do in a sprint.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a cool way to sort of, put it into their language too, and kind of rally around something we both know.
Well, it brings a time-bound focus to what you're doing.
That's right.
and you've got one thing got one major thing in common, which is you're responding to a customer need or some customer feedback.
Yes,
very
absolutely.
Interesting. Well, Kaycee, this has been really interesting. And I think I mentioned to you, I have one question I ask every guest, and that is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, could be professional, could be personal, what would that advice be?
This is such a good question. And I feel like I laid awake last night thinking about my answer to this. But that's not a good thing, because it should come really naturally, because I do think the advice I would give to myself is to be myself, to be really authentic. This company, Premier, is a really amazing place to work, because you can connect to a mission and a vision and values that actually matter. And I love that about where I am. And so when I started really leaning into my own unique leadership style and just my own way of working, which is honestly kind of tenacious and disruptive, which could scare a lot of CEOs, but it doesn't scare mine. I just flourished here. And I think that could be the case for others. If you're not yourself, if you don't feel like yourself and you're not working for something or a cause or someone that really matters, then, the feeling might be mutual. And so I really feel strongly that authenticity is the way to go.
I so agree. It took me a long time to learn that I needed to do that. And then a long time to actually do it. It's hard. It's a really difficult adjustment. You sort of think, oh, you're just going to switch it on. It's like, oh no. It's like suddenly I found that I had a hard time. I thought I could hear myself differently. But the other thing is, other people had to adjust around me. I mean, it's sort of like, who is this? What's going on with him?
It's hard.
It's very hard. Very hard.
It really is. But I've found I'm a mentor, a coach, a leader to so many younger professionals. And what I've found is that when you can really match their skill set and their passion, and what motivates them with the job to be done, you see productivity skyrocket, results skyrocket. And when you find that really great balance with individuals, I mean, the sky's the limit. So.
Well, Kaycee, it has been a great pleasure having you on the podcast. So thank you so much for your insights and your wisdom today. Before we go, I just want to let the listeners know that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, on Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. And you'll also be able to view the video through a link in the show notes. And we have more great guests coming up. They got a lot to rival Kaycee, I think. And I want to thank you all for listening. And again, thank you to Kaycee. And if you're out there and you have a topic you'd like me to cover, you can email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com. That's adam@healthlaunchpad.com.